Hello everyone, and today you are going to learn how you can crush pawn to e4 with the modern Scandinavian defense. This is a very uncommon and tricky reply to 1 e4, but it is also completely sound, and there exist many fun gambits, such as the Portuguese Gambit, where you can sacrifice 2 pawns early on for a gigantic attack that white simply cannot survive. So this comes after white goes pawn to e4, and we go pawn to d5 here, striking the center immediately and attacking their pawn. Defending it would be quite passive, so their best move here is to capture, and normally in Scandinavian, we capture back right away, but I don't like this because after knight to c3, our queen's attacked, they get a free piece developed, and I think there's no reason to allow this, so instead, you're going to play knight to f6, this being the modern variation. The idea here is we're delaying capturing because we're going to take back with the knight. That way, knight to c3 just doesn't really affect us that much. For example, the most common move here is knight to c3 by white. We're simply going to capture back now, and let's say they capture again on d5. This is not a good move because after queen takes back, we just have a Scandinavian on steroids because we have the queen center, but no knight is actually going to come and kick us out. So we have pretty easy play here. After like d4, we can go knight to c6, attack the pawn, and our plan here is to go bishop g4 and long castles, and we'll just have a lot of pressure on their center. So let's go something like knight to f3 here. We can now go bishop to g4, pin their knight to their queen. Let's say bishop e2, unpinning. We can now simply go long castles, and yeah, we're just doing great. We have a lot of pressure on the center, and if they play something like c3, we can strike in the center with e5. Their entire center is just exploding now. We have a ton of pressure on them, and we are doing fantastic in that position. So instead, capturing is not very good. A better move here is bishop to c4. Attacking our knight, in here you don't want to move back and be passive and stupid. You're going to play c6 here. Defend your knight in the center. Capturing would be a bad mistake because after captures back here, we just have a very strong pawn in the center. Development will be easy, and they really cannot match us in the center. Instead, a better try is queen to f3. This can get quite tricky. They're attacking our knight again now, and they're threatening some scary stuff on the f7 pawn. The easiest way to go about this is simply drop back with knight to f6, and surprisingly here, they have just about nothing. And our bishop is now going to go to g4. So if they play a move like d3 here, we can now put the bishop on g4, attack their queen. After it moves over, we can simply develop our other knight. We'll go e6, bishop e7, castles, and we're doing quite well in this position. We're pretty safe, and we really have not that many problems. Their most testing move here is h3, preventing bishop g4, and now our bishop does not really have a good home, so instead, we're just going to keep it at its little home here, and we're just going to play knight b to d7. We're threatening to come in the middle and just, completely fork the absolute crap-a-roni out of them, so instead, their best move here is d4, preventing that, and here we'll now play knight to b6, attack the bishop, it will back up to b3, and now simple e6 here. And even though our bishop is blocked in, they really do not have that much here because our position is so solid, and soon our knights are going to come in the center. So after something like knight d2, we can go bishop e7, let's say castles, and after bishop to f4, we can put this knight on the central d5 square. We have a very well defended outpost with a knight and 2 pawns defending. We can potentially expand on the queen side with b5, a5, a4. This bishop can potentially then go out that way, and we're actually doing very well in this position, and white basically has no advantage here. So that is how to handle the knight to c3 line, which is not their best move. Let's look at a more, maybe not better, but more interesting try, pawn to c4. This greedy move tries to hang on to the extra pawn. Here, you'll now play pawn to e6, and we're going to go into something called the Icelandic-Palme Gambit. What this means is that after they capture, we're going to take back with the bishop, and even though we're down a pawn here, we have 2 pieces developed. White has quite literally just nothing here, and the pawn in c4 only acts as weakness because now the d3 and d4 squares are considerably more weak. They have 2 very common tries here. I'll look at the second most common one first, knight to f3. You'll now play a very tricky queen to e7. This move looks very odd, blocking the bishop and all that, but we have this discovered attack, and they can't really deal with it in any easy way. If they go bishop e2 here, then we can simply take on c4. The bishop is pinned so they cannot capture, and we simply win the pawn back. We are doing quite well there. Their better move is to block with the queen, And here you have a few options, but the one that seemed the best to me only occurred in 1% of games, that being bishop to f5. This is a very odd looking move, but the idea here is that after this queen trade, even though you are still down a pawn and we've traded queens, which is normally bad, we are actually dominating here because white still cannot do anything about their lagging development. And here we'll simply go knight to c6 and try to quickly long castle with a great position. For example, the two most common moves here are for white to play knight to c3. We go knight to c6. And now d4. Two most common moves in a row, and they're already losing after knight to b4. Simply, our knight is getting into c2, and they really just cannot stop it at all. Their only try here would be like king to d2, which is very sad to try and defend. And here, you can now simply go long castles, and even though we're still down a pawn here, we are very much dominating them. Their king is extremely awkward. We have a ton of pressure. Our knight could still be coming into c2, and our rook on this d file is completely dominating them. So, knight to f3 is not a very good move. Their best try here would be pawn to d4, and now the move you must know is to play this check on bishop to b4. Bishop b4 attacking their king, and they have two common moves here. Bishop d2 is the best move, but the move here that is nearly 4 times as common is knight to c3. But after a very nice knight to e4 here, attacking their pin knight, white must have insane precision to even survive in this position. For example, the most common move here is now bishop to d2. On pinning, we now simply win a pawn with queen takes in d4. We're also threatening a checkmate, which is quite nasty, the likely capture, and after, queen takes back, and bishop to e2 here, we can simply go knight to c6. The position is even material, but with our knight coming in and the insane amount of pressure we have on them, also long castles here to attack their queen, we are doing fantastic in this position with a very nice advantage here. Their other try would be knight to e2. This is technically their best move, but it literally occurs in like 3% of games. Literally nobody knows this, and also hangs a pawn after bishop takes on c4. So we win the pawn back, and after something like a3, we can have a mass trade with bishop takes, knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes, and now rook takes, and here we can simply castle. And we basically have no problems in this position. White also has a very awkward position because they can't castle short now, and their their queen side is just completely wide open, so their king does not have a very good home. And here we can simply develop moves like knight to c6, put a rook on this open file, and we're actually just doing very good here. We once again have little to no problems. Back here, their best move is instead of knight to c3, bishop to d2 here, immediately block, and here you can now play very tricky queen to e7, defending the bishop, and once again lining up some tricky threats on their king. Their best move here is to capture. This is almost universally played. You'll now capture back for the queen, and after they block with their own queen here to defend the pawn as well, we can simply play knight to c6. And once again, we get a position where the knight is quickly going to be coming in to the c2 fork here. If they play like captures right away, then after knight takes back, we're just doing very well here. Our knight is getting in. They would have to develop very awkwardly with a move like knight to a3. And after long castles here, we are once again just dominating. Even though we're down a pawn, we have so much pressure on them. They have basically no development. Of extremely sad knight on a3. We are doing absolutely fantastic there. A very tricky move here would be d5. This is their best try to try and fork us. But after long castles, we are telling your opponent that you have nerves of steel. They cannot capture either piece because we are pinning them. Their best try here would be to capture us. Now we will take back, and even though our bishop here is still under attack, they must defend this fork. So they have to play knight to a3 here, and now a simple bishop to f5. And once again, we have so much pressure on c2, our rooks are quickly going to be coming in on this open file. And we're just completely dominating in that position. We can quickly strike in the center of c6 to try and attack him as well. Like I said, we are doing absolutely fantastic there. So that's how to handle pawn to c4 with the Icelandic-Palme Gambit, trying to greedily hang on to the pawn. What else can they try here? A very simple try would be knight to f3, but this is not particularly challenging because we can now take back on d5 of our knight. White can now play pawn to d4. We do have to be a little careful because they're threatening to go c4 and kind of start rolling us in the center, and you have a few ways to play, but the one that really seems like the best way to try and get an advantage is g6. The simple idea here is that white has a pawn on d4, so let's go and try to attack it while also being safe. After something like c4 here, we can simply back up our knight to b6. Let's say knight to c3 now, simple development, we go bishop to g7. Put pressure on the pawn, let's say bishop to e3 now, just defending solidly. Now we can just simply castle here. We have already castled, so we already have a pretty safe position, but after something like bishop e2, we can try bishop to g4. We're attacking one of the pieces we're attacking one of the pieces that is defending their center, and after something like castles here, we can go knight to c6. We're actually threatening to win the pawn now with bishop takes and knight takes. So pretty much everybody here plays pawn to d5 to try and move the pawn up, but here now our bishop is really opened up. This is a very strong bishop, and after captures on f3, by the way, can't capture our knight because bishop takes back. We're doing very well there. After it takes back, we can go knight to f3 here, sorry, knight to e5, and yeah, we're just dominating. Their bishop is attacked. We are now attacking this pawn twice. Can they defend it? I don't know. And yeah, we're just doing very well in this position with, once again, very little problems. Lastly here, before we move on to their best move, which is pawn to d4, they have one tricky move here, which is bishop to b5 check. The idea here is that after we block bishop d7, they'll play bishop c4, and they're trying to hang on to the pawn, and in the meantime, they are hanging on, but quickly, that is not going to be reality. We're going to play bishop g4 here, attack their queen. They'll play f3 here to try and get our bishop out of here. If they play like knight to f3, we can simply take back right away. We have no problems there. f3, and now we'll back up to f5 here, and we're simply going to win the pawn back with a quick knight b7 and knight b6, and they really cannot stop us from winning the pawn back. After something like knight c3, we'll go knight b to d7. Let's say knight g to e2 here. We can now play knight b6. We just followed the plan. And after like bishop back to b3, we can simply capture. And I mean, yeah, there's really no problems here. After like d4, e6, we'll quickly go bishop e7 here, castle, or even bishop d6. And yeah, we once again just have a safe and solid positions with little to zero problems. Alright, so now let's move on to what their best try here is, which is pawn to d4. Just giving us the pawn back, not really caring, but we're going to play something called the extremely tricky Portuguese Gambit with bishop g4. The idea here is we're attacking their queen, and no matter what they do here, it's going to give them a very awkward position. Their best move is to go pawn to f3, but they also have two other very common tries. If they go knight to f3 here, then we'll simply play queen takes on d5, and we're doing quite well here. Now we're immediately attacking their knight, once again putting a lot of pressure on them. If they go knight to c3 and attack our queen, we can simply move it over to h5. We have a lot of pressure on their knight now. We'll quickly go knight c6, long castle. We're doing quite well. If instead they block with bishop e2, then we're going to follow the exact same plan. This is such a simple opening. After knight c6, we're once again just going to go long castles here. If they go like c3, then after like long castles and castles, we can just go e5. Very similar to the first position, if not actually a direct transposition. We once again have such a large amount of pressure on their queen, and we're doing very, very well in that position. Their best try here is to attack our queen with c4. And after move it over to h5 once again, putting on this pressure, they can try to start rolling us with pawn to d5. Attacking our knight, we're going to play a tricky long castles. Once again, they cannot capture us because their queen is sitting right there. And it looks a little odd though, because white can play queen a4. Now our knight still has to move here, but then they're going to get the pawn on a7, which looks quite bad, but in reality, we're going to be totally fine here after a nice knight to e5 here. What this move does is it attacks this knight. They cannot really capture us, because then queen takes back. We have a lot of pressure here. We're doing quite well. We really have no problems in this position. After like f3 here, we can go bishop back to f5. They can capture the pawn, but after a simple e6, we are just doing so well here. We have such a large amount of development in the center. Their king is extremely stranded in the center. We're quickly going to be getting in, and they have to deal with this immediately, which they most likely will not. Instead, a better try would be for them to capture this pawn on a7. We'll take with the bishop here. They have to capture it back. They will likely take with the pawn. And here, we're now going to take with our knight with this check. If they give a check first, like back here, if they play like this check, queen a8 check, and after king d7, and queen a4 check, you have two options here. You can just go back to c8 and just go for a drawn position, or you can play c6 and keep fighting. Either option is objectively good, but you can pick whichever one you want depending on who you're playing. But back here, if after pawn captures and they keep playing on with knight to f3 check, they don't really want to capture here, because after queen captures, attacking the rook, they have to give this check once again. We get a same position where you can either play c6 or you can play king back to c8 and go for the draw or whatever. If after captures they play king over to d1, which is their best try here, we can simply play queen to f5. This knight is still defended. We'll quickly strike in the center with e6, and yeah, their king is stranded right in the middle here, and we're not even down any material in this position, and I would say we're doing quite well. And of course, they can still give this check, but after king runs and queen a4 check, it is the same story. You can go for the draw, or you can play on with c6. So that's how to handle knight to f3. Their other move here is bishop to e2 other than f3, which is not a very strong try. We're going to capture their bishop. Now they have to take back with any piece. If they take with the queen, we'll simply take on d5 now. We can take with our queen, attack this pawn, and after something like knight to f3, let's say e6 here, let's say white castles. These are all pretty common moves, but white can play a lot of stuff here. We can now go knight to c6. Just once again attack their center, and after something like c3 here, if they try c4, by the way, this loses the pawn because knight takes on d4, and after captures, and king moves over, we can simply take back. We're up 2 pawns here actually now. We are just doing very, very well in that position. So instead, c3 here, and after something like bishop d6, now we can quickly castle here, and once again, we really have no problems in our position. Our queen could be susceptible to attacks, but there's nothing really bad they can actually do here. Instead, all the way back here, their best try would be to instead capture if their knight. Capturing the queen is not great. And here, you'll now play simply queen takes on d5. It's a very similar story. After like castles, we can go knight to c6. And once again, we're going to try and just castle here, just, put a lot of pressure on their d-pawn. And if they play this, attacking our queen, we just move over, queen h5. And after, bishop f4, long castles, we really have no problems here. Our rook does have a lot of pressure here, and if they play like a simple queen d3, where you can actually get a great position after e5, we have this pin here, so they cannot just capture because we can just take back. We're doing great. And yeah, we're just doing very well. Striking the center, we're likely going to win a pawn. And once again, I know I said a lot, but we really have no problems in that position, and we are doing great there. Now, let's get on to the main juice here, which is pawn to f3. Attacking our bishop, we're going to back it up to f5 here. And they have 2 lines here. Their most common move by far is to go c4 here. And I'll look at this first because it's more important. You'll now play e6 here. Attacking their pawn, they likely want to keep their extra material. They're going to capture us. And here, we do not capture back and be stupid and passive. We play the nice knight to c6. This looks completely ridiculous because they can capture. And after king takes back, we have a king on f7 and we're down 2 pawns. But in reality, we are the ones with an advantage here because this just helps us because we're going to move our bishop out and we're going to get a rook and just attack their king right away. And we're completely dominating them here. They really cannot survive here. Their best move, or actually most common move, is bishop e3. But this doesn't work. After bishop b4 check, let's say knight c3 now, rook over to e8, attacking the bishop. And after queen d2 here, we can simply win a pawn with queen takes, you can take the queen, but knight takes on d4 is likely more trickier. Going for various forks here, you're not completely winning, but there is so much pressure on white, I really do not see how they could actually survive this position. Their objectively best move here is to go knight e2, which, nobody's going to play this. If they do play this, they'll go knight b4. And here, once again, we see the same idea here. Our knight and bishop are getting in. And after, knight a3 here, if they try to defend, a simple knight d3 now. Check, and you're completely winning here. After king d2, now your knight goes into f2, they get forked, and according to the engine back here, they can survive, but no, they're not going to survive this. Instead, back here, capturing the pawn is not their best try. They have 2 other tries here. If they go d5, then a simple knight b4. Our knight is once again getting in. If they capture, then after king takes back, this is a very similar position. We're once again winning. If they go knight to a3 here to try and defend, we can simply go bishop c5. And yeah, we just have so much development here. White has nothing except the puniest of puny knights. and I once again see no way that white can actually end up surviving that position. Their best move here is bishop to e3. According to the engine, they are equal after this move, but we can now play a very tricky queen to e7. Lining up on their bishop and king and pawn. If they capture, then after king takes back, this is a very similar position to the other one, likely a little bit worse, but we're still going to have so much pressure on their bishop, they really have to try to survive here. If instead they play like a knight c3 and resist taking, then after knight b4, we once again get one of these positions. Let's say rook c1 now, we can now long castle, and once again, even though we are still down 2 pawns here, we have literally just so much pressure on their center. I really just do not see any way they could survive this. They'd have to play like king f2, and now we can capture back. We're only down 1 pawn here. Their king is very awkward. Their entire position is just the definition of awkward. When you look at the word awkward, this position is what you see, and yeah, they're just completely like dominated there. Their best try is back here to play the move pawn to g4 instead of c4. The idea being after bishop comes back to g6, c4, e6, they can resist here with knight c3 instead of actually capturing our pawn. Your move to play here is to now capture back on d5, and they now play g5, attacking our knight. You have a few moves to actually go here. The best one is the very odd looking g8. The idea is that after knight takes back, we'll play knight c6, and we're going to redevelop this knight to this square on e7 here. And even though this is the engine's technically best line, they still only have a really very small advantage. Their best move, we'd play like king f2, which I cannot see a human just playing that, and we still have a lot of pressure on their center, and even in this objectively best line here, we are still having a very fun time with a lot of tricks and traps. Alright, well thank you so much for watching this entire video on how to play the modern Scandinavian and the fun gambits that come alongside it. I hope you really enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and have a good day.